Episode 1, Jason Van Orden, Imposter Syndrome and How to Beat It in Business.
Welcome to the Rise to Success podcast, inspiring you to create a successful business on your terms. Join money coach Meredith Bissiker and her expert guests every Monday and Thursday to get the tools you need to help you create your ideal business and life. Now, here's your host, Meredith.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Rise to Success podcast. I'm so excited to be kicking off the podcast with my friend Jason Van Orden. He's on a mission to help entrepreneurs who want to make a big impact in the world become influencers. And he's considered a top expert in the online business and marketing spaces. Jason's known for being one of the voices behind the long-running Internet Business Mastery podcast. And more recently, he's launched as a consultant to 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs. If you're feeling stuck in your business or even paralyzed, this is the episode for you. Jason shares his journey to uncovering a phenomenon that holds back new and seasoned entrepreneurs alike. It's called Imposter Syndrome. And Jason tells us how he discovered it was holding him back. Imposter syndrome can force us to question our own abilities in spite of the successes and experiences we have, and it can creep up without warning. Jason shares some surprising facts about imposter syndrome, including how the actress Tina Fey has suffered from it from time to time. And he gives us some simple but powerful strategies to overcome it and to go on and find success on our own terms. You can connect with Jason Van Orden by heading to www.jasonvanorden.com, where he has highly valuable free resources that you can take on board right away to help you overcome imposter syndrome and to launch yourself as an influencer. I myself refer to his website quite frequently. I love the topic of imposter syndrome because so many of my money coaching clients run into this same issue. That's why I offer a free version of my Stop Giving It Away, Get Paid course to members of my audience. I created this course for people who feel guilty about charging and are afraid to say their prices out loud because they don't feel they're worth it. You can check out this free course at www.meredithbissiker.com/get-paid. Okay, let's get started with our conversation with Jason Van Orden. Jason Van Orden, thank you so much for joining the Rise to Success podcast.
My pleasure, Meredith. So happy to be here.
Well, I'm very excited about this episode. It is a special episode where we're going to go off the beaten track a bit and dig into something that we hear about and people talk about, but I think really we only scratch the surface, and that is imposter syndrome. I know that you've recently researched the heck out of this, and we'll get into it in just a few moments, but I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about your business and what you've been doing for the past 11 or 12 years.
Okay, wow, that's 11 or 12 years.
Yes.
As quickly as possible. Yeah, no problem. So, the last 11 years, one of my main pursuits has been my podcast, Internet Business Mastery, and that's kind of the core of the business, teaching beginning internet entrepreneurs how to get started online, how to, find something inside of themselves that they want to offer to the world, and then build a business around that. More recently, I've been doing, as that business has actually taken less of my time just because of, systems and things are running it smoothly. I've been able to focus on working with 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs with business strategy and helping them get really clear on their mostly their product strategy is what I like to work with people on. Like, what is the messaging and positioning in their market of what is their audience really looking for, helping them package their kind of unique brilliance and ideas into a process that they can then package up into a variety of products and services that help them maximize how much income they make and then also how much impact that they're able to have in the world with their ideas.
Excellent. I like that phrase, unique brilliance.
I just made that one up, I guess, right?
Oh.
Out here off the spot.
Well, I'll put it in the show notes.
You know me, I think a lot of people say unique genius, and I always try to be a little bit of a rebel and change up my words a little bit.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's a good one. All right, so let's dig into imposter syndrome. As I said, I know you've been researching this a lot over the past few months. What pushed you to dig into this more?
Dealing with imposter syndrome myself.
Yeah.
Is the thing. Yep. And then also just knowing, I mean, I love working with, people who want to be seen as an influencer in the world, somebody who really wants to amplify their message, amplify their ideas. And it's very normal to run into on regular basis the feeling that we don't have what it takes, or that we're just faking it. That at any moment now, people are going to figure out that we're not as interesting or smart or skilled as they might think we are, and that simply through luck or people skills or whatever it might be, that we've just kind of pulled the wool over people's eyes, and that they're going to realize at any point that it's all just kind of a facade. I'd like to point out that this is, in light of the fact that there's evidence to the contrary, meaning that there's plenty of evidence that we do deserve whatever we've accomplished, but that we downplay that and hence question our own abilities and really kind of suffer a lack of confidence in light of the things that we want to try to accomplish.
That lack of confidence can get us at any time as well. It's like it's sneaky, sitting back there waiting to pounce on us.
Well, and like I said, even being online 12 years, recently I was dealing with a bout of this, and it's normal for it to pop up in times where maybe we're stretching ourselves in a new direction. There's various things that can kind of bring it forward, but it's a very normal thing for high achievers, people who are striving for big stuff to deal with. So that's, one of the first things to understand and know about imposter syndrome is that it is a thing, and it's a thing that people deal with, people that are very actually, the opposite of what they think that they are. They are very skilled and high achieving and brilliant, and yet they don't allow themselves to feel that. And, obviously the downside or the consequence of this is that it can hold you back from doing awesome stuff because you don't feel that you're capable of it, or you doubt your own abilities.
Yeah. And I love that you've brought it up that you've experienced this after the success that you've experienced and your experience. Certainly people who are just starting off in business will experience this almost undoubtedly. You have to have some very stalwart confidence to not encounter this. But we see entrepreneurs, especially those of us who are in the entrepreneurial circles online, we see entrepreneurs who are making those jumps to 6 figures, 7 figures. And I don't think that a lot of them share those layers that they've peeled back. Right. And it's so important for us because even those people who have started off in business, I'm thinking of myself as well, but lots of people I know, okay, this is great. I've launched this product. Everything's awesome. Now what do? Oh, I can't do that. That's not something I can do. So just being aware that this exists. And as I said, we've really only scratched the surface. Somebody might post something in Facebook and say, oh, I'm encountering this. And someone else might say, oh, that's imposter syndrome. But really, what is that? So this is such an important discussion to have, just to bring awareness to this, and it's okay, and to have the tools to get through it. So in your research around imposter syndrome, what was one or two of the most surprising facts that came out of it for you?
Well, one thing that's it's surprising and helpful is that if you start searching around, you find how pervasive this is, and you're going to come up with quotes from, celebrities, very well-known and successful people who deal with this all the time. Everybody from, writers and poets like Maya Angelou to comedians like Tina Fey, to I mean, now I'm blanking off the top of my head, but like actresses and people like who is it on this? I'm just thinking of right now. I can see her face, but I can't see her name. But anyway, really well-known actors and actresses who are like, hey, every time I go on set, I figure that, they're going to be figuring out that they're going to finally figure out that I've just been faking it this whole time. And so anyway, that's one surprising thing, is just realizing that, people that we look up to and might think that they've got it all figured out and that they have no reason at all to feel this way. That they deal with it too. So that's one surprising thing that pops up when you start looking into this. And then the other surprising thing that comes up is the fact that there's a Tina Fey quote that actually I really like that comes out of her book. I believe it's out of her book, Bossy Pants, her book. And she talks about how it does tend to come and go, and like and I guess this wasn't surprising, but it was maybe relieving, or I hadn't really thought about it, because like I just said, like with myself, I've seen it come and go. And so when I read that quote, it was, she's like, it's kind of like in those moments, like I'll have this, there'll be moments where I feel, incredibly confident and like everything's going my way. And I just like ride that wave as much as I can. And then all of a sudden I'll have these times where it's like, man, I just don't have what it takes. And I just don't think I can do this. And so, but, she's just learned to recognize that, it's a bit of mindfulness and self-awareness, and just know it's like, okay, look, this is this thing, and here it is again. And I've felt this before, but it will pass. And remember that there's those times where you do feel confident, and remember back on all your past accomplishments, and then know that the next kind of wave of self-confidence, it's like you can just ride that sucker and move on forward. So I know that was just kind of a bit of a relief and surprising to hear that so many really successful people do deal with this, and hear their take on it, because there are lots of great quotes and mentions of it in people's books out there.
It is relieving to know that other people experience this. And I can't put my finger on why there's such relief around that. Maybe it's normal.
Well, I think it's easy in those moments of feeling lack of self-confidence to feel like, something is wrong with you, or that you're broken, that you don't have what it takes. I mean, that's built into imposter syndrome, this feeling that you don't have what it takes. But to know that people who clearly, in your estimation, do have what it takes, because they've done great stuff, and that you're not the only one. I mean, just to know that there's a thing to call it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how often have you gone and you pick up a book and you're reading it and it's describing you to a T, and like just, whatever it is, whether it's imposter syndrome or some health issue or whatever in life. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a thing, and somebody understands it and understands me. And like, that's just like the first step of relief, I think, is to know it's like, oh, it's not like there's a fundamentally core problem inside of me that's just unfixable.
Right. So. I'm normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
like to feel normal.
Yeah.
So you just touched on this a little bit, but what would you recommend are some simple steps when someone finds himself mired in this and it's stalling their progress in their business or in their life? I mean, gosh, this can even apply to people who are wanting to move up in their jobs. It affects us in so many different ways. What are some simple steps to help people just, first of all, figure out that this is what's going on? That's what this podcast is about. Once they figure this out, what do you recommend they do?
Yeah. So, with entrepreneurs, we fall into this trap of, and it's because, as entrepreneurs, we tend to be visionary and, and high achievers, like I said, in anything, even if this is in your career or whatever. But, if you're one of those people who does think forward and likes to believe that they can, make bigger things happen, in the future and grow and strive, and you run into this, it's normal to get stuck in kind of this gap between where we're at right now and where we would like to be, and to sometimes have that shake, kind of lead or spark this lack of confidence, or this, welling up of imposter syndrome. And so one of the things we have to do is remind ourselves to recognize and take in our accomplishments. And, as I say this is a reminder to myself, because I can be really, really bad at doing this. That is like, if somebody compliments you. I mean, this is like the classic symptom of imposter syndrome. Somebody compliments you or, gives you wonderful feedback on something you've done. And, you might politely go, "Oh, that's so nice. Thank you."
Mm-hmm.
But like, have you really stopped, and allowed yourself to take that in and go, "No, like that's about me, and that's who I am."
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of my authentic best self, which is a phrase that I get from Amy Cuddy. Her latest book, Presence, talks about imposter syndrome, and she's got a couple wonderful articles out there about recently out of the based on this book about imposter syndrome. And so one thing I would recommend is like an actionable to do around that is to have a record of your authentic best self. And that could take whatever form feels good, whether that's, a collection of emails that you've tucked away in your Gmail with a particular tag, under a folder. Like, look, this is like, customers, clients, people, coworkers, colleagues who have complimented me, and that you refer back to that at times. Or whether that's, an Evernote, where you like write down and brainstorm and come up with, 10 best habits, just the things that you tend to do really well. And or even like, one thing, an exercise I got from a wonderful book called Unique Ability, which is based on a framework by Dan Sullivan and his team at Strategic Coach, which is all about kind of defining your best self and how you best show up in the world. One thing that they have you do is they have you write a letter or an email to 4 or 5 or 6 trusted people in your life. It could be family, friends, colleagues, and just ask them, say, look, I'm going through this process of kind of trying to really dial in what I do best so I can really help, I can use that to really guide the work that I do. So what are things that you depend on me for, or what are things that you see that I do well, or what are things that I consistently, times when I consistently, you think I perform at my best. And that might feel awkward to write and ask people that, but you'll find that, most people are actually really happy to give you that feedback, for one. It's where, we don't tend to downplay what it is that we do really well, because it's natural to us.
Yes, exactly.
And so we just think, oh, well, doesn't everybody do that? Right. And so anyway, having some record of this, a collection of these letters, an Evernote note with your journalings about it, or these emails that you've put aside, and then, and it might feel funny, but like referencing them regularly to remind yourself. I mean, Amy Cuddy talks about a wonderful study in her book where she talks about how knowing, defining your authentic best self, referring back to that, has helped people in very stressful situations. They did a study, and I'm not even going to try to pretend to remember exactly what the study was, but the end result of it was that knowing and referring back to your authentic best self, this record of who you are, does wonders for helping you show up in a very confident way in your work and in your life. So that's one thing that I would recommend people try doing.
I think both those exercises are vital when I almost think that this is something to get into a good habit around, especially recording wins. I personally have started to make a point of recording my wins in my day timer as they go along, even little ones. I have a friend who calls them.
That's an excellent one. Yep.
Yeah. My friend.
Breakthroughs at the end of the day. Love it.
Yes, that's just it, because we forget. Like you said, they may have felt like they've come easily to us, or we just forget. So being able to go back and not try to remember in anxious times what we're effective at, what we're good at, what people like in us. It's so important. And this is something I take my clients through as well when they're saying, oh my gosh, what do I have to offer? This is what I asked them to do. And the other suggestion you had about reaching out to people, I've done the same thing myself. In fact, when I was considering becoming a money coach, I thought, I can't become a money coach. Who am I? Who am I what the heck? So I got that advice from a money coach named Barbara Stanny. She's written some excellent books, and some of the advice she gave, or one piece of advice she gave, was reach out ask people, what your best qualities are, what they think your strong suits are, what you should be doing in work, and also what maybe you can improve on, or what some of your weaker, I hate the word weak, but the lesser points. And I did that, and it was scary as heck, but the feedback was so helpful, and I didn't tell anybody why I was doing it. And when I asked them, what should I be doing? A couple of them said, you should be coaching or counseling or doing something like that. And I thought, okay, there you go. So people can feel a lot of resistance around it, but it's one of the most rewarding exercises you can do for yourself.
Absolutely. I agree. And and you indirectly brought up another thing that I would recommend, and that is to have a coach or somebody that can also help you through that. And I know that wasn't the point of what you were saying there, but I'm glad you became a coach, because I've hired you as a money coach in the past, and it was super helpful for me. And there were bouts of imposter syndrome where then I did, turn to you as well, and you gave wonderful insights. And there's even, again, studies. I know a topic you and I talked a lot about was self-efficacy.
Yes.
Which is tied to imposter syndrome. And I'd say essentially self-efficacy is the opposite of imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. It's the confidence in your abilities to accomplish the things that you want to most bring about in life, and to handle whatever might come up and get in your way, on the path there. And, studies show that there are 3 things that most boost our self-efficacy. One is turning to and getting the trusted input, the belief of somebody that we, trust and look to, maybe look up to, and so whether that's a coach, a parent, a spouse, that's invaluable to have that belief that it's like, no, you are capable of this. Number 2 is the vicarious taking in of seeing other people who we perceive as being just like us, succeeding at similar things. And that's where listening to podcasts sometimes can be wonderful, because you can hear stories of people like you in whatever area, whether it's business or health and weight loss or relationships or whatever. There's podcasts out there interviewing people. And so hearing other people's successes and having that feeling, wow, they are a lot like me. So if they can do it, I can do it. And then the third one is just your own taking action and seeing the results. And that's one thing, we kind of touched on this, but basically when I have a huge challenge ahead of me, I try to remind myself, look, I faced things like this before. I've overcome it before. I do get creative, and when I'm pushed up against the wall, and I do figure it out. But those are our 3 dependable sources of that self-efficacy, which is critical for then overcoming imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Like you said, the direct opposite. Thank you for bringing that up, because self-efficacy is something that is not, it's not a term that is, sexy, or people put it out there all the time. Oh, you need to work on your self-efficacy, but it's the truth.
And hands down, I think it's one of the most important things for entrepreneurs to understand and foster in themselves. The more you study self-efficacy, man, that's everything. Because without self-efficacy, which apparently is a tongue twister, you won't take consistent action. And without consistent, deliberate action, that's the whole key to success right there.
Yeah, taking the action, not just saying, I want to do this, or when is it going to work out for me, or I'll do it next week. Taking that action, and the action doesn't have to be big. One step at a time. One small step at a time. And before you know it, you're there. And what the heck? That was easier than I thought.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a couple of books. What are some other resources that you have found helpful or intriguing on this subject?
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there. So, I love Amy Cuddy's book, Presence. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because people might have seen her TED Talk where she talks about the power poses. And if you haven't, that's a wonderful TED Talk, where literally standing in your superhero pose for 2 minutes can affect your mood, right? And your confidence, which is wild to think about. Brene Brown is also one of my absolute favorite go-tos around this topic. A lot of my imposter syndrome is also closely tied to perfectionism. So one of her earliest books is The Gifts of Imperfection. Then she has Daring Greatly. And then more recently, she has a book about, overcoming failure. So Rising Strong is the name of that book.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, wonderful books. She's so just wise and smart and accessible. And I don't know, I can't rave about Brene Brown.
She's fantastic.
So all of her books are definitely worth reading. So those are two people I would recommend, Brene Brown and Amy Cuddy. And both of them have videos, if you're like trying to decide like who you might resonate with or, what book to read, just Google Brene Brown. You'll come up with, there's a fantastic presentation she did at a conference called 99U, where she talks about your critics and why critics don't matter and will completely shift your perception around, the fear of criticism and the people who may or may not criticize you. Amy Cuddy, like I said, she has a couple great TED Talks, and then there's videos and interviews around her more recent book that are amazing. And then kind of a little more indirectly, but still related, is the book called Mindset, Carol Dweck. And so this might sound familiar because of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And really, ultimately, what she's describing in this wonderful way of growth mindset versus fixed mindset is having self-efficacy versus staying stagnant in your self-efficacy. So also there's videos out there available from her, or any of those books you can get on audio. And so, I mean, just, studying the people who have studied this stuff and who offer amazing, frameworks and insights around it are some of the things that I would definitely recommend people check out. And then I mentioned briefly that book, Unique Ability. If you're interested in the concept of authentic best self, absolutely cannot recommend enough the book Unique Ability. I got, that's based on Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach came up with that framework, but it was actually written by some women that work closely with him. It's funny, everything I just mentioned is actually written by women. So for what it's worth, there's that.
Yes.
So, Unique Ability is, I first went through that process probably back in like 2009, 2010, and it absolutely changed the way I look at my business, myself. It's the way I teach entrepreneurs, the way I coach, the way I consult.
Okay.
That's an amazing resource for that best self.
Okay.
Pick.
I've got it in big letters with a circle around it, so I think I know what I'm reading next.
Awesome.
So here on the Rise to Success podcast, my intention is to talk about success on our own terms. So yes, I'm a money coach. Yes, I help people change their mindset around money so that they let themselves make more of it. But success isn't wrapped up in the dollars we make. It certainly can help us judge where we are and the reach that we've had out to people. What I'm getting at is we're talking about imposter syndrome here, and I think that our definition of success can sometimes, or often, obviously, play into it. What is your definition of success, Jason?
Okay, so, I mean, I'll give you my philosophical definition that I try to live by, but I'll preamble it by saying I very easily, if I'm not conscious, fall into the trap of simply measuring my success by the money, which, again, is something I've worked on with you as a money coach. And money is a useful metric to look at as one piece of the puzzle, but that is dangerous when that's the only metric for a number of reasons that relate back to everything we've been talking about, and confidence and self-efficacy and ignoring other values that are important to you and so on. So my philosophical or my ideal understanding of success is, to live a good life, to live a happy life. And that may seem really trite and simple, but that's what it is. And that kind of breaks down into 3 areas for me. And this is a framework I've shared with other people that they tend to resonate with and find helpful as well. So and there's lots of research that backs this up too. So the 3 areas are purpose, so having something that we are working towards, contributing to, and it's kind of that, but that's bigger than yourself kind of type thing, right? So you, in your corner of the world, again, with your best self, I mean, that's one reason to figure that out. What is your best self is to then apply it, whether that's as an entrepreneur or in your work or your daily life, and my understanding of myself that I got from that book, Unique Ability, it shows up in every aspect of my life, not just my business, but also in how I parent and in how in my hobbies and things like that. So having that sense of purpose, and, all we have to do is look at, sadly, when you see a lot of people, let's say, retire, they lose a sense of purpose. And or you see this in, as we record this, the Olympics are going on, and you'll see this with Olympic athletes and stars who, like, the moment that they retire from being that star, whatever, like, now it's like they're like, now what? And they actually can really go through some dark stuff, like losing a sense of self. So having a sense of purpose and working continually towards that is one key aspect of success. The other one the second one is relationships, belonging. This is all just tied to fundamental human needs that we have to different degrees, right? So all kinds of science to back up that the quality of our relationships are so key and important. And so that's family and friendship and getting out regularly or spending time connecting with those close to you. So that's another area that I measure success is, am I fostering and building those quality relationships? And then the third area is freedom. And there's lots of studies about perceived well-being and lived well-being and how freedom is one of the absolute most important factors in that. And, that's a really broad topic. A lot of times we say freedom and we think, okay, like, political and, hey, I live in a free country. Oh, they don't live in a free, that's one aspect of it. But there's all kinds of, financial freedom. So we talk about, people think financial freedom is having millions of dollars in the bank so you don't have to worry about it ever again. But maybe financial freedom is as simple as, having the self-efficacy to know that you can generate income on demand as an entrepreneur and go and, create solutions. And, entrepreneurs and millionaires, if they lose it all, they're like, okay, tomorrow I'll start again.
It's renewable.
Financial freedom, so that there's freedom from our own, within our relationships. There's freedom of purpose, freedom of association, freedom of location, being able to move around if that's something you want. And, I should point out that each of these three areas, we kind of define it for ourselves because while we all share human needs in these three areas, we all kind of have differing degrees of those needs and different strategies that we use to fulfill those needs. But it's a bit abstract, I guess, but those are the three areas that I analyze and plan in and strive for to live a successful, happy life.
I'm glad you brought those up because so many people will sit back, especially I think people our age, parents, where we've got different things pulling at us. Some people will feel like, oh, I shouldn't really worry about freedom right now. I shouldn't. That seems almost luxurious. But to find ultimate success, we do need to find it on our own terms. And it's okay to say no to certain things that other people love and want. So maybe some people love staying put, but other people want to travel, and that's all right. You're not going to wreck your life by wanting something. If you feel it and know it, it's important to find ways to go after that.
And that on your own terms is really important. You mentioned early on, like if you see, people living a certain lifestyle or having a certain level of success, and you make all kinds of assumptions about that. And, it's why we're so fascinated with celebrity. We have this feeling, it's like, oh, when it comes to relationships and purpose and, freedom, they've got it all. They've got it all figured out. No stress. And that's just not that's absolutely not true. And you know better than anybody as a money coach, just because you have tons of money doesn't mean that you've got it all like dialed in and figured out. Right.
Oh, totally.
In fact, that's one of the biggest reasons I finally went looking and hired you as a money coach. Is like I had reached some of the pinnacle lifestyle design things that I imagined for myself. I lived in Paris for a year with my wife and my child, and it just kind of always lived this approach of, oh well, I'll just make more money if I need to, make some of these other worries or fulfill these needs better. But like I needed to figure out how to do that. Money doesn't just erase these things, as you know, and money doesn't just, money just amplifies whatever's already going on. Yeah. So, that goes back to what we were saying about why money as a metric in itself is not a very good measurement of our happiness and success in life.
No. And that's because money is just something. It's a thing. It's a tool, and that can work in our favor. But when we give it characteristics, personalities, like it's evil, then or we're expecting it to be our savior and make us happy, that's where we get into trouble. But when we look at it and just realize this is a tool to help us create the life that we want, that's when we need to move up a level and figure out what is it that we want? What's our purpose? What do we want in our relationships? And what does freedom mean to us? I love those three areas to look at.
And if I were to sum up kind of the theme across each of those areas, I think those are like the key areas of life, and there's all kinds of research that backs this up as well. But, what it comes down to, I think maybe even the secret to life is being able to understand and be aware of our fundamental human needs and on our terms, the things that because like I said, we all have kind of varying degrees. Some people are happy with a couple close relationships. Some people, like my wife, want to get out every night and interact with it. So understanding your own needs and how you, can best fulfill those. Understanding how to communicate those needs to others in relationships. When it comes up like, hey, this is something I need, and I recognize this need in you or whatever. And then third, like choosing healthy strategies for fulfilling those needs for ourselves, right? And it's like, man, if you figure that out, like I think you're living a pretty good life if you've dialed in that recognition, awareness of, and pursuit of needs, as well as respecting the needs respecting the needs of others as well.
Yeah.
Man, wouldn't we all live a happier life if we had that?
Oh yeah. Out? Yeah. I think a really good reference is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And understanding that we can't skip a step. He actually has 5 needs, and the first one is physiological, food, shelter, that sort of thing. We need those things to keep our body going. The next level is safety. Then there's love and belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization, which is where the purpose comes. But if we don't have that level of safety, it's really hard to go after those next needs.
Right.
If we don't have love and belonging, how can we self-actualize? I just find that that's for a whole nother podcast conversation.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. But that
it is.
It is a really great framework to look at in light of everything we were just talking about.
Yeah. Well, thanks. This has been a fantastic conversation. Jason, where can people find you?
Well, my website, jasonvanorden.com. If you're interested in the kinds of, we went into a fantastic topic today that I love talking about. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I dove into this topic is because I love working with and helping people who want to have an impact in the world as an influencer, as an entrepreneur, and help them get that message out there. And so if you want more information about that, then you can find me at jasonvanorden.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about such an important topic.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I loved this conversation. Thanks, Meredith.
Good. You're welcome.